Welcome to
Okay.
Open Betas, Episode 9 with Regal and Swimfan, the podcast about the life of games and the game of life. I'm Regal.
And I'm Swimfan.
And today we'll be talking less structured, less of a precise topic, and certainly probably won't get to any answers, but we're going to be talking about feedback. Um,
No answers.
yeah,
All
no answers,
questions.
only questions. That's right. That's what my mental health coach said to me.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
find answers, only ask questions.
No, that they only had questions and no answers. So I'd be like,
I see.
yeah. So it'd be like, oh, well, I feel this type of way, and it's a struggle. And they'd be like, they ask some questions, and they'd be like, well, what do you think? And they said,
Hmm.
I don't have any answers, only questions. Which is, I guess, is fair given the role
I
that,
mean, they kind of want you to get to it, but
yeah,
I don't
that
know.
is the
Sounds
idea.
like you could do better than that.
Well, I mean, it was still helpful. It was just a bit of
Uh,
a curious thing to say in the
yeah, yeah.
moment, but
I haven't encountered that one.
Cool. Yeah. So what exactly are we doing? So I think we mentioned this in one of the early episodes. Maybe when
Mm-hmm.
we were talking more about company hierarchy, structure, organizational stuff. And the reason I'm bringing it up here is that for example, there's been some. Uh, well, this isn't new, but every once in a while it crops up that some public figure like goes public and talks about how much they've been affected by the harassment they receive, right? Which is like every public figure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's the ones that talk about how much it affected them, and then there's the ones that get a lot of it but have no soul. So uh, it doesn't affect them, right? Like Elon Musk, for example. Like I can't even imagine how many death threats Elon Musk gets, but he has no soul. So I'm actually quite sure that he doesn't care, and he just thinks it's funny, right?
I bet that doesn't bother him, but I bet it bothers him when I bet he does. The way he posts makes me think he does get bothered by the things people say,
That's true.
but but maybe not the death threats part. I don't know. He might just
Yeah,
sort of
I
laugh those
guess
off.
I guess bothered is different, right? Because what I talking about, and which I'm sure everyone has seen, is like very frequently like a public figure. So in my case, I follow like esports competitors, for example, or even just sports
Mm-hmm.
competitors, people that run companies,
P sports.
streamers. Yeah, P sports. That's right. Um, every once in a while, actually pretty often, not even every once in a while, but from time to time they go public and talk about like, I've always received this kind of hate, and recently it's gotten bad, and I felt like I had to take a break to, etc. Right?
Yeah,
And
like
I feel like,
everybody reveals that they have had this happen. Like it's not.
right,
It's so common, so
right.
widespread.
In fact, it's like universal, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that is the kind of reaction, like bothering means different things to different people, which we'll talk about. But like, I'm sure that Elon Musk never feels that way, right?
You
Like
mean like
he
threatened?
never feels like, wow, like people really hate me. That makes me want to like doubt myself and wonder if I should even be doing this at all, right?
Yeah, he probably doesn't doubt himself.
So yeah, that
Like,
I'm
no,
I'm
I'm
quite
great. These
confident
people are
in.
idiots.
So yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And of course, like bothering, of course, then can manifest itself in different ways. Like maybe just gets angry, or like gets frustrated, or takes it out on the local lackeys that are nearby or
Yeah.
whatever.
Uh, he takes it out on Grimes. The
Well, hopefully that's
um the only shoot. So you really need like a pretty thick skin to be a public figure in this case, right? I mean, it sort of precludes a lot of sensitive people being public figures because of how this is.
I agree. But I think thick skin can manifest itself in different ways, right?
Uh
And
huh.
I think if you sort of take the traditional idea of thick skin and you take it to the extreme, you get really cynical, antagonistic people that often are completely unreceptive to feedback, right?
Uh
In
huh.
some cases, and I think maybe that's like the core idea. I want to start with, like, I don't think that's necessarily a healthy paradigm, because of the end result, but also just fundamentally, I think Not everyone can develop that much of a thick skin in that sense.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things we talked about the first time was like how can we develop a feedback system where like developers in our case, right, can receive the feedback that they need, but still be and receive like true feedback, right? Not like just filter for positive.
Yeah, this is one thing about this that interests me is that there is a there is a case to be made that I if I am some sort of genius or I have invented something that is just going to blow people away, or I have a creative vision that doesn't seem to match anyone else's, there is something to be said for like not accepting any feedback from anything
Mm-hmm.
and getting just the
Right.
weird ass shit somebody's totally weird brain can come up with. And like uh Hideo Kojima is like
Yep.
kind of like that.
That's
He's
the one I was thinking of. Yep.
Yeah, like he's got weird ideas, and sometimes it's dumb, and sometimes it's just strange, and sometimes it's really amazing and moves the industry forward a little bit.
Right.
But I get the impression that it's kind of him, right? I mean, he gets influenced by other things, other creative people, but it's not like he's getting feedback. I don't think he accepts feedback like
Right.
most
Exactly.
developers would.
And so the thing is, in the creative, so when we sort of put that idea, like the platonic ideal of that kind of powerful creative on a pedestal, if we take it to
Uh-huh.
the most positive extreme, right? It's always usually a creative person, like a creative visionary, like Eminem or whatever, right? Or Kojima in this case, or like
Uh-huh.
whatever the equivalent in the film industry is, where it's like, oh, look at how important it was to this person's vision that they didn't uh, because I think one of the things that happens, especially in the creative world, is that when people think of receiving feedback, what that usually means is like trending back towards the norm, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what feedback usually does is, well, feedback comes from, on average, the average person. In other words, right? Like the more feedback you get, the more it will trend towards the norm. And so,
Yeah.
the more you listen to and incorporate feedback, the more you'll tend towards depending on the situation, but the more you'll tend back to the middle. And
Yeah,
so
you'll
like
get to what normal people are used to a little
right,
bit.
right, and it won't happen all at once, but it'll happen a little bit at a time, right? And I think
Hmm.
that's sort of just a numbers game. But if you sort of take the creative element out of it and you imagine for example, this is very common, right? If you imagine a CEO who isn't receptive to feedback at all because they believe in their marketing vision or their
Hmm.
product vision, you very
Hmm.
quickly get to the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Where there's a lot of those people too. We just talked about one of them in the beginning of the show, right? And they have a very clear idea what they want to happen and they have the power to execute it, but and they don't have to listen to anyone. And when they don't, sometimes you get, you know, ExxonMobil or whatever, right?
Yeah, you mean what they produce ends up
Right.
sucking, or the people or it
Right.
makes no positive impact on people.
Or you get what was the California is it a Pacific Gas or whatever, like they just blanket refuse to make any changes for like safety or for like
Oh, yeah.
environmental
I
reasons or
mean,
safety, right? Because they're like because
we'll cut into profits, baby.
exactly, right. And that's sort of the opposite, the antithetical extreme of not caring what people say, right? If you don't care what people say but you're wrong, and that's obviously
Hmm.
subjective, but if you're quote unquote wrong or if you're quote unquote right, you end up you end up being, you end up at one or the other end, right? Without any kind of way to
Yeah,
correct yourself.
or there is. I think this example raises to me that, or you have a totally different goal in mind when you're
Right.
creating the thing than anyone using the thing wants.
Right.
So, like the
Right.
ExxonMobil ideas, it's not about providing the most power to the most people for the best price. It's about
Right.
making profits. So, feedback they get won't necessarily even be considered at all, like you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. If it doesn't increase the green number, then, or
Yeah,
the
why
black
would we do
number, I
that?
suppose, then we don't care, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so we'll talk about the way we kind of structured this is basically just talk about some individual parts that are true that don't really fit together that well. When we just gave an example just now, right? Like
Things that are true about feedback.
right about feedback, which is
Okay.
if you have a great creative vision and you don't take any feedback, then you can create something that maybe would have been impossible if you took a bunch of feedback. On the other hand, if you have a poor creative vision and you ignore all the feedback, then you create something that's bad that could have maybe been salvaged if you changed a few things. Those two things, I mean, obviously there's a layer there where it's like, well, sometimes things are true and sometimes they're false, and we can sort of build things to determine what kind of feedback to take and which improvements we should always make versus which we can sort of go by instinct, etc. We won't go into that much detail, but just present some high-level concepts.
When you're talking about like art, and I am, yes, referring to games as art.
Oh boy.
When you're talking about creative creations that don't necessarily have like a super practical use other than entertainment or,
Yep.
you know, elevating your consciousness or whatever. Well, I mean, Metal Gear Solid 3 elevated my consciousness,
I see.
so that's why I brought that up.
So did Dark Souls, apparently.
Yeah, Dark Souls. Who's to say you can't totally say for sure whether in the moment that this new piece of art is going to affect a lot of people or not, like especially
Right.
if it's very strange, people may initially react badly to it, but then it becomes down the line more of a cult classic or whatever. Yeah, so it can be hard to tell what if and when you should take feedback, I guess is what
Right.
I'm saying.
Totally. You're a movie guy, right?
Yeah, I like movies.
Give me your top 5 cult classics. I won't know any of them.
Oh.
But fire away.
I don't have that. I don't have that
You
loaded
don't
up.
have it? Okay. Well, number one
No,
is
I don't
The
have that
Room,
loaded
right?
up. The Room. No. I mean, that stuff's funny, but I would not put it on any top 5 list.
Um.
Troll 2, though, sure.
Oh, well, I don't know what that is, but that sounds
It's another similar
mildly familiar. I
thing,
see.
you know, bad movie that's
see,
fun
I
to
see.
watch.
Cool.
Yeah, I'd have to think about that and get back to you. I don't
Okay.
know.
Well,
I don't know.
we'll do it as a site. We'll do it as site content.
I guess,
So the reason
maybe
we
They Live. I like They Live. The Carpenter
Can't say
movie
I know,
with
but-
Roddy Piper.
I don't know if we've talked about this, but
Keith
I've
David?
watched like 10 movies. Actually, that's not true. I used to watch a lot of movies as a kid, but
But you're not a movie person anymore?
no, not.
Yeah, I
since-
never see you in the movie rooms on
Yeah.
the server.
I think the last movie I watched in theaters was The Avengers 2012 or whatever. So
That's the first Marvel one,
yeah.
not the British spy movie.
The
Avengers?
No, the Marvel one, I believe. I
Okay,
think it was
okay.
the first The Avengers.
Why don't you
I
like
could-
movies?
They are boring. So
I see.
what I mean is not that all movies are boring, but that watching them, like for example, I prefer to read. Not that I do that much these days either, but I can
Okay.
sort of accelerate at my own pace, right? And I know people do this in movies too, like people skip around, which I would do if I watched them. But so two things, like fundamentally, like the story part of games, because obviously what do I do instead of watching movies? I play games. The story part of games is like pretty low on the interest list to me usually. And because in games you can sort of, well, there's a lot more games than there are movies, and you can sort of ignore the story if you choose to, right?
I
Et
don't
cetera.
know
But
if there are a lot more games than movies, but
no, I think that's clearly true, don't you?
more games than movies?
Yeah, like at least like 100 times more, right? Probably.
Geez, I don't think so, but I guess
Really?
I don't know. We'd have
Oh,
to
we
look at it. I'd have to
we have to
figure
think
out.
about it.
There's
I think-
there's a shit ton of movies.
I know. I guess. Well, I guess if you equate, well, I guess I don't know how many like Bollywood movies are produced every year,
Yeah, if
but
you count the entire world.
um, I still think there's a lot more games, but maybe that's wrong. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, basically, I don't like the story part of the action is not that appealing to me, and it's kind of
Yeah,
boring just because I feel like sometimes I'm stuck there, and when I get bored in a movie, I usually just turn it off, and over time I've found that most of them are more boring than otherwise, so I usually just don't start them.
interesting. Huh. Okay.
That might be something to talk more about.
Sure, sure. I mean, I
At a
love
later date.
movies, but
Yeah.
I'm a very like I'll watch pretty much pretty much anything. Not anything, but it definitely keeps my attention. But I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is not unusual, especially for your
For
generation
my
and younger,
generation, yeah. I
and
apparently
younger,
don't
right?
have ADHD though. I actually
Yeah.
was assessed for ADHD sometime last year, I think, just more or less for fun.
But I
But
mean, maybe you had a point that like the different mediums, like even in the case of books, like and games, you can kind of control the pace a little
yeah,
more based on what you how you want to take it in. So I get that. I get that. I like the idea of it being completely out of my hands sometimes, and it's just like I'm just gonna see the story, the vision of whatever this director or writer made, and
yeah,
see it the way they want to see it. But
that's fair. Oh,
yeah,
I guess the other thing I should say is I do watch things. I watch, like I mentioned, esports and p sports, which I think. So one of the
but not
things,
like narratives. It sounds like.
right? One of the things that annoys me about movies is when people make illogical decisions, which
Sure,
happens a
sure.
lot in real life too. But the thing that annoys me more is like in real life, when something really weird happens, you can read reporting or do research or um, even just talk to people. Like you understand that there's clearly a real person behind there, and you can find out more about the person or the situation and kind of figure out why things happened. And usually you can get down to a clear answer. But in a movie, obviously, those details don't exist because you exist in a fantasy world, right? You can't find out more about a company, Umbrella Corp or whatever, aside from what is told to you in the story.
I
So
see.
when there are
Okay.
things that are frustratingly gaps, like what are they called, plot holes?
You mean like you do something different in that situation?
Well, either I would do something different, or when something doesn't make sense, uh, that's usually bigger than like a character making a dumb decision, which is also annoying. But usually it's like when
Yeah,
something in the
the plot
world
holes
doesn't make
take you out of
sense.
it
Yeah,
easily. I
it
mean,
is
sure. Okay.
rather annoying.
Yeah, I mean, I know that is like if a movie's not well constructed,
Right,
it'll have plot holes, and even sometimes when it is a really good movie, there's plot holes that they just kind of want you to gloss over.
right. So like one
But there are in
example,
games too. I mean, game stories have
yeah.
are rife with problems like that.
Oh, for sure. Which is similarly why like I said, I don't actually pay that much into most stories in games.
Yeah, yeah.
So like one of the things, um, so what I guess here's one of the differences. So like in The Dark Knight, right? Like the Joker puts up all these elaborate traps that really don't make like there's no way they would work in real life
Right, right.
because they rely so much on a very specific set of things happening in order, right?
Yes.
So when you see that, it's sort of cool to watch all the explosions happen, but it's sort of it loses its coolness to me when I sort of realize that, oh well, these things are extremely these things are just put here to put explosion on the screen, right? Or put like
You want
a
you
cool
want
series of
some sort
events.
of like grounded reality a little bit,
Right.
or like
But see,
yeah,
the thing
okay.
is, the argument usually is, well, crazy things happen in real life all the time. And I think that's true. But they happen because of some like actual esports and p sports have this, right? Like really cool, unlikely things, underdog stories happen because of actual tangible effort, right? That some people that you can watch interviews of and follow put in, and they can do something that is quote unquote meaningful, right? It's not something that it's not something that the writer just wrote down and said, oh, well, we're going to put the sequence of events in order that could technically happen, which feels like, to me, it feels like a bit like it cheapens the outcome, right? Compared to
it definitely definitely lands better with the audience if something rings true. Like you can see, like, oh yeah, he could have possibly done that, but I do give movies a lot of leeway and games a lot of leeway in that the thing you said, like they want something crazy to happen or amazing to happen that probably wouldn't happen in real life. Like that's what I like about movies is they don't necessarily really reflect real life. They answer the what if questions. What if this happened, even though it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that's when they're done well. That is the part that shows up, right? Which is not to say that I only like I totally understand the appeal of that, and I certainly feel the appeal of that too. But just for me, like my sense of getting taken out of that moment by something implausible or completely outlandish happening, especially when it's not explained, I guess is stronger than most people. Like basically my suspension of disbelief is pretty weak.
I hear you. That makes sense. Yeah. I can see that. Anyway, we're getting away from
what were feedback. So I guess
we're talking about like movie creators not taking feedback.
Okay.
I mean, the Avatar director James Cameron is known for being very like singular vision, not taking feedback and doing it his way.
Which, I guess, which is worth noting as a generally positive thing, right?
I mean, it's positive if you got what it takes. If you really got what it takes. Exactly. If you don't, it's negative.
Exactly. That might be like the idea of vision. Might be something worth exploring because I do think it's very important in ways that maybe are not always apparent, especially for people who haven't worked in like a large company or something. Anyway, the reason I brought this up for this week is just that we are stepping into this world, right? Not that we're anywhere close to it yet, but there's a bit like I felt a bit of disillusionment following the idea that like if we do our best and do really well, one day someone's going to send us death threats, and it's just like, man,
that's how you know you're doing well.
Like I guess so, but I don't know if I don't know if that's any solace to me,
Yeah.
Like I understand, I can and I will talk through why does this happen and what drives people to do this and so on. But at the end of the day, there's a human out there who hates you, like a real human being that has to eat and go to a job probably, and has friends, and they hate you and they want you to die, and that's that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, I see that, but I also believe that a lot of people are like that, and that's just kind of the world we live in.
I sure do. A lot more people are like that than we think. Well, that's not true. Than most people think, right? The example I usually use is like whenever I try to think about how many crazy people there are, because now as adults we have a really strong ability to filter who we interact with, right?
Yeah.
Basically ever since I got to college, like I could I don't know about you, but I could basically filter out all the people I didn't want to interact with anymore out of my life. So to sort of
it took me longer than that, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. So sort of to get a better, to kind of remind myself how many let's say unstable people there, I have to go back to high school, where it's like, oh yeah, in every class of 30 there was, out of 30 people, there was at least one or two unstable people. Sometimes I was the unstable person, to be honest. But
well, and in high school, who's really stable?
Yeah, that's certainly true. Well, but high schoolers are the ones on the internet, right? So,
yeah. Well, schoolers.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, when did you first? I first got on the internet at like 12 or 13. But that was also different. At the beginning of the internet.
Yeah, it's different for us because it was not ubiquitous. Like I didn't get a smartphone until I was 19 or whatever. So
Oh, okay.
It was not ubiquitous for our
Yeah,
generation.
I was earlier, but I was also like spoiled. So I got a cell phone around the same time.
This guy got a cell phone. Unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I always try to remind myself that like it's not like I think this is probably the most important thing. It's not like the average person that posts a comment on the internet is like a stable, normal person. In fact, it's very likely to be one of 32 weird kids, quote unquote, in your
Yeah,
class, right?
yeah, it could very
Essentially.
well be one of the two weird kids, and also people, they people lash out for all sorts of reasons
Hmm.
related to themselves that don't necessarily actually have anything to do with you.
Yeah,
But
which is which is kind
but
of
it's
the
still, if it manifests as like I want to fucking kill you, I see how it still feels bad.
right. Yeah. It's I guess I guess at the end of the day, it's important to sort of build a healthier model, which is something I want to bring up because I think in the age of the internet, and especially with social media, because it sort of breaks the traditional paradigm. So in real life, you go to a bar, not that I've ever been to a bar, but if you go to a bar and this like weird redneck, like who has had way too much to drink, says he's going to kill you,
Hmm.
you can brush that out pretty easily, right? Because you know, like you can connect that statement to a human, right, to an actual person that you can learn more about, and
And you're
you
like, I
can,
can see this guy's just an asshole.
yeah, exactly. I can see this guy clearly is not someone I need to care about. He's obviously just very belligerent, or he's drunk. Um, this is not someone that needs to have an effect on my life, right? I
Can't you
think
write off death threat people the same way on the
I
internet?
think you can. I think that would be the hope, but I
It's
think it's
harder.
harder. It's harder because you don't necessarily know everything, right? I think one of
Hmm.
the things that can happen, especially on social media, is that because we try to do that, exactly that, we end up sort of we sort of make the assumption that every comment that we don't like comes from a group of people we don't like, right? Which
Yeah.
is, you see a
Okay.
lot in
Yeah.
politics, right? Like
Hmm.
if you follow a lot of politics, which I know you do,
Hmm.
especially in the U.S., you get into this mindset, and I've had this happen to me frequently too, where it's like, oh, I see a comment I don't like, that must come from the other side. Look at these,
Sure.
whichever group you don't like at the moment, whether
Yeah.
it's
You will
conservatives or
assume it's from
liberals
them.
or Americans or Europeans or immigrants or whatever, right? You just
Uh-huh,
assume that
uh-huh.
it's them, right?
Yep.
And that's often not true, right? And I think that's one of the negatives of social media, where it breaks this idea that like instead of we kind of like subconsciously, instinctively have to ascribe a comment to some type of thing that we can say as a person or a group of people, and
Hmm.
because we don't have access to the person anymore on social media, then we sort of can often make uh, we basically stereotype, right?
Yeah. We bad
Uh,
assumptions. Uh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Did you? Hey, I have a question. Did you ever like fuck around with people on the internet?
a little bit,
Like trolling, I guess I would say.
yeah, a little bit, not too much, but a little
Okay.
bit.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of that. I did a lot of that when I was a kid,
Yeah,
and I got so much hate in response to me being a annoying asshole
right,
that I I think I got a little used to it, like
mm,
internet hate, or
right,
hate in the form of something I'm going to read that has come
right,
over the internet.
right.
I'm just because at the time it made me laugh. Like that's what I'm going for.
Yeah,
I want to
me
get a
too.
rise out of people, and it's like, oh, this guy totally flipped out because I did this. This is awesome.
And that still happens, right? And that happens on both ends.
Yeah, yeah.
I used
Oh,
to
absolutely.
I mess with people on fanfiction.net or .com.
Oh no.
I used to
Uh
write
huh.
fan fiction as
Mm-hmm,
a
mm-hmm.
fourth through sixth grader, and then I would
Oh wow.
this one person left a negative comment on one of my fan fictions, and so
Mm-hmm.
uh, I left a negative comment on one of their fan fictions, and then we got into a
Oh
little
no.
spat, which is quite funny in retrospect. But
All right. So what were you a fan of? What was the fiction about?
Golden Sun, of course.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
a video game. Huh.
Well, yeah. I mean, even at that point,
Yeah,
like I
like
said,
movies and
you know,
stuff.
my life ended when I was 6, right? So it was basically video games from there on out.
I see. I see.
I did read some fan fiction about non-video games, but
Mm-hmm. For a while
not very much.
back then.
Just like the stuff I saw, I think I recall reading NCIS fan fiction. Because
NCIS
that's
fandom.
yeah,
Wow.
because that's what I watched on TV.
Ah,
I really don't have strong memories past that, to be honest. Maybe Star
okay.
Wars.
Okay.
Hard to imagine Star Wars wouldn't have entered into it at some point.
Uh, wouldn't have what?
I, I'm
Hard
sure
to
I
imagine
would
what?
have. I'm sure I would have read some Star Wars fanfiction at some
Oh,
point. I
oh,
just don't remember any of
yeah,
it. But
yeah, yeah. My wife writes fan fiction quite a bit.
really interesting.
Yes, she's a serious writer for fun.
Um, she's a serious writer for fun. What?
Yep, she like writes a lot. I mean,
Oh,
and
I see. Okay.
completes stories and stuff.
Is
Like
she
she
a
doesn't
fun
just
writer for serious? I used to, you know, there's
a fun
basically
writer for serious. Yes.
a like Rogue One is basically Star Wars fan fiction, right? Just official
Hmm.
published Star Wars fan fiction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Kind of.
you know, there's a future there, a very low paying future, but
It's a spin-off. A lot of fan fiction uses the characters we already know and love, though,
yeah.
right?
And
Like
by the
that's
way,
part of
in
the
Japan,
thing.
this is called dojin, and
Hmm.
it's well, I wouldn't say a booming industry, but it's a very popular industry.
Is that the
This could be an
sexy
interesting
one?
topic. Dojin is so in the West, it's usually equated because that's what most commonly gets translated.
Uh-huh.
That's where the demand is. But Dojin refers to any fan fiction, any derivative
Oh,
work, basically.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Um,
Huh.
yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about these high level points.
Yes.
So
What is
the
true?
way I broke these up is that I think these are all high level points that are true on a high level, and
Mm.
once we get into the details, they change and how true they are and where they're applied changes. But I think it is important to lay out all of these things and talk about them and try to get into some ideas about when they do and don't
And we
happen.
should be thinking about these in context of video games specifically,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I guess
The
for
life of
us, for
games.
sure. Right. Yeah, the
Yeah.
life of,
Okay.
or the, but we can also think about it in terms of the game of life. I mean, I think these are
All right.
universally true. Some of the examples are that. I think the most important thing to establish is that feedback is important, right? I mean, this seems
Mm-hmm.
obvious, but a lot of the ways that people deal with negative feedback sort of chip away at this idea, right? So, for example, one of the first options people give is like, well, you just can't listen to what anyone on Twitter says, which is true to, but not universally true, right? Like if you, you know, if you, let's say, do something that's racist in your company and Twitter gets really, really angry at you, which they will,
Mm-hmm.
that you
Yeah,
can't
they
really
wrong.
use, you know, that like, that means something, right? Like that you would hope that that
Yeah.
affects the company into doing what you consider to be a positive change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I think.
that's, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, we did
Oh,
it.
we did it again. Oops, I did it again.
Go.
Uh, yeah, I think so. I think it's important to basically have the starting point that feedback is important, and for any piece of feedback that we get, we need to understand that it's potentially valuable, right? And when we
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
discredit feedback wholesale, we need to be careful doing that, right? We can't, like, I think our defense mechanism can't just start with, well, you just can't listen to any comments on Twitch or Twitter or Reddit or whatever. Like,
Right. Right. I mean, I think you can make that rule for certain types of comments. I
yeah,
think like
yeah,
these unhinged, violent comments. I'm like, all right, I'm just not going to even listen to
right,
what he says. But
right.
the point stands. Yeah.
I think a good starting point is like any objective feedback you should probably listen to no matter what, right? That doesn't mean you have to take it as high importance. But if it's for example, objective feedback is like, hey, this package arrived, the object arrived to my home and it's broken. Like
Yeah,
that part
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
objective, and you should care about that. I mean, you don't have to try to fix it necessarily, but you should understand that, hey, someone received a broken product, right?
Yeah, this is a bad
Same,
experience
right,
a customer's
right.
having.
And now the rest of the comment is like, I hope you burn in hell, and I
Uh-huh.
recommend no one ever buys anything with this company again, et cetera, et cetera. And that part you don't necessarily have to listen to, but I think as a starting point,
Yeah,
like
I'm in
anything
your
objective,
house. Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
anything objective you should probably at least think about. And by the way, this also goes for positive feedback, right? One of the things is like, if positive feedback makes you feel good and you want to get positive feedback, then negative feedback probably has to make you feel bad, right? It's pretty hard to say you don't care about
Yes, and
feedback, but that you only care about the positive feedback.
yeah, we're definitely going to be we're definitely naturally biased towards the feedback that's good, right? The
Right,
positive feedback,
right,
and so we may overvalue it
right,
as well. But actually, on the other side of things, if a piece of feedback is so bad and you feel there is some truth to it, I guess that you might hold higher than other things too.
right.
I think
And
the big point that comes up here is individual pieces of feedback can be hard to do anything with unless you're talking about feedback from another developer that you
right,
respect, for
hmm
example. But
hmm
if it's just like the players of the game, you kind of have to get that at a higher sample size before it
right,
starts being meaningful in a way you can use, right?
right. And that goes into kind of the next point, which is feedback really sucks, right? Even though it's important, the quality of the feedback, any individual piece of feedback is very low, generally speaking, right?
Yeah, especially if it's just open answer feedback on a
hmm
YouTube or whatever. Like
Yeah,
if your research people are directing their thoughts in a specific way, you can get better feedback
right,
in a interview, for example. But in that case, it's just you're just getting completely raw, unfocused feedback,
right,
emotional
exactly.
feedback.
And that emotional is kind of the key word there, right? Because people, like for example, I think we talked about this once. You and I have basically never left a review on a restaurant, right?
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Maybe
true.
maybe once or twice, but even if whether we had a great experience or a bad experience, like we don't naturally feel the desire to leave that review unless maybe they need it, and then this hasn't happened, but maybe it's a new restaurant, they really need reviews to get customers, whatever, and I really like them. I might do that,
Yeah,
but
I could see that happening. Yeah.
yeah. But on our own, without any kind of other impetus, like I've never felt strongly enough to leave a review. And I think most people are like that. I think the people that leave a lot of reviews are people who are motivated to do so for some reason, or
Hmm.
who have an extreme experience, right? Some very emotional experience that kind of gets them
Yeah, I
over the
mean, most
hump,
reviews in that case are the people who really liked it or people who really
right?
hated it or had
Right,
their waiter
right.
spit on them or something.
Or they
Do
found a
you? But do
fried
you?
rat in their
Yeah, they
KFC.
found a fried rat in their salad. Do you leave Steam reviews? Do you leave game reviews?
I don't. But I'm not against it in any way. I just I'm just
It's
lazy.
just not.
So
You're just like
yeah,
I don't want to do. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass.
you
Uh,
know, I think it's actually very. I think it's pretty good to think about this in terms of like how hard it is to call people to get them to give you their opinion on a survey, right? Like that's one of the most annoying things that can happen is like
you
someone
mean like a
calling.
total cold call? Like
Perhaps,
you just get
or
a call out of nowhere about a subject out of nowhere, and you have to answer stuff.
maybe not even that, but even something like, hey, the cable repair person came to my house, and
Uh huh.
uh, I'm calling as a representative from their company, and I'm gonna ask you how they did or whatever, right?
Right, right. Or the
That's
email follow up with
right,
that.
or the email, right? That's really annoying. Like if you don't have a strong emotional connection to that, like I just really don't feel like I want to do that. you know?
Yeah, there's for one, I don't really care, and I have other
Yeah.
shit to do.
Yeah.
And two, like, if I did this for everyone, I would never have any time at all. Like,
Right.
you'd really have to. So it sort of implies you'd really have to care
Right.
or be like, just as you said, the sort of person that wants to do
Right.
that for whatever reason.
Right. And they
For
are
attention, I don't know.
that well, that's where social media feedback comes in, right? Like
Yeah.
social media gives a lot of people a impetus to give their feedback because they get clout or the equivalent of clout, right?
Hmm.
They get like neuron activation when their tweet has engagement or whatever. Ugh,
Hmm.
said
Hmm.
a gross word.
Engagement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Stay bachelor forever, man.
Well,
I'm kidding.
yeah, it was a good pun.
Engagement joke. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So like that. So that's why when you get feedback, it's often angry, right? Or
Hmm.
extremely happy, extremely positive. Like this is the best experience ever. And obviously, at some point, you want to read that stuff because it makes you understand that like you had a positive effect on someone. Um, but feedback really sucks. I think that's just true. Like unless you're paying, even if you're paying people to give you feedback, right? Uh, it's hard to get a lot of quality in it.
Yes. Yeah. For yes. Okay.
And I guess
I
the other
wonder.
thing is there's just often not much to say. Like if you had a neutral experience and you're like
Hmm.
forced to give feedback, I usually don't have anything to say, right? It's like I ordered something on eBay and it arrived as expected and it was fine.
Yeah,
Like, what
it's
do you
fine.
want
It
me to
worked.
say?
It works as expected.
It
That's
was
about
good,
all I can
right?
say.
Yeah. Same
Yeah.
with Airbnb, you or Lyft, for example, right? You try like you you want to make sure you give feedback when you had a good experience, just so that they can like pump up their rating, right, and continue their business. So,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, that's what it comes down to. For it sounds like for you as well, but for me, if I, like you said, if I want to try to support a
right,
business or a game or whatever that I think is really good, and usually I'll only do that if it's undervalued currently.
right,
Like, if it's, I don't leave a review on Call of Duty or whatever because there's
yeah,
1,000 things and they're doing fine. I might just leave one to be a snarky asshole or something,
right,
but for real reviews, I leave them for the small games that have very few, and I'm like, oh, this game should get more attention, so
hmm.
I'm gonna do that on Steam.
This is why every McDonald's has no more than 3 stars, right? Like, there's never been a McDonald's that has more than 3 stars because no one feels the need to express that they had a normal McDonald's experience.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. The only reviews that exist are complaints because everyone else understands that like this is a McDonald's, it's consistent, it's a chain, and you're never going to be able to get an outstanding experience. The norm is what would normally just be outstanding. Right?
yeah. I see what you're saying. Okay.
And the last
You
thing
know,
about feedback really
I want
sucked
to say
me.
one. I want to
Okay.
say one more thing about that is when if I do leave a star rating for something, I have a real hard time trying to do it like a real review, like some sort of Siskel and Ebert thing. I I I believe you either should leave the maximum amount of stars or the minimum amount of stars,
Mm.
depending on whether you want this thing to continue being a thing. And
Your
beyond that,
thumbs up. Hmm.
your thumbs up or thumbs down, like
Mm.
your 5 stars or your 1 star, because anything in between, I think is I'm not sure what it does, especially
Hmm.
in context of hundreds of other comments. Like it just seems like something to waste your time reading if you have that time. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that bears out in the data, right? Like the vast majority of normal star ratings are either 5 stars or no stars, which is why 4 stars is basically the same as no stars, right? Essentially. What's funny
Right. I could see that. Yeah.
what's funny is
And
on Yelp,
mhm.
there's a there's a group of people I find very annoying, which is like the wannabe food critics that are but they're not actually food critics. They just post like them on Yelp. They write like 7 paragraph reviews on restaurants,
Yeah. Yeah,
and they
some people
leave
really
like
fancy themselves like a amateur
yeah,
critic.
and they are the ones that use the whole star scale. They're like, oh, the
Oh,
service
yes.
was like a 3.7, not quite a 3.5, but not good enough to be a 4.2. It's like,
Yes,
all
yes.
right. I mean, you're
Yeah,
using a
thank you.
different scale than the rest of humanity, but
I mean, yeah, some people really get in there. I mean, honestly, when Yelp and things first started, my wife wrote a few reviews like that, and I was always like, I don't think this is worth your time, but she doesn't anymore. But at the beginning, there was a belief, especially at the very beginning of like crowdsourced reviews for internet stuff. There was a wish, there was a hope that this would just make it so we know exactly what the good thing to buy is all the time. But it's just not. It didn't bear out like that, right?
right. And one of
And
the reasons,
let's not even not to mention the what the companies like Amazon and Yelp do to
right?
weight things differently based on if they're getting advertising
Yeah.
money from a restaurant or fake reviews from
Hmm.
competitors who just like do review bombs.
Yeah. One of the reasons that it has not borne out is basically exactly that, right? So this is one of the, I refer to this perhaps as like open C's feedback, as in the feedback uh, box is open and anyone can type whatever they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is obviously a very clear attack vector for any various kinds of bad actors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this can be, like you said, this can be very unsophisticated, which is like, oh, I saw this one review. So I remember this in college. This uh, this individual, let's say a college
Mm-hmm.
student, went to a sushi bar that was near to where I lived, and they cut them off. The bar cut them off, and they got really upset, and they left a drunken comment of 0 stars about how it's unfair that they got cut off, and then got their whole table to leave that comment, right? Which was
Oh, really?
yeah,
Wow.
which was very
Were they
funny.
all drunk too then?
I wasn't there, so couldn't tell you, but
But yeah, that's
uh,
totally like ridiculous reason to
right.
leave a review, right?
But right, so that
Cut me off
obviously,
because I was wasted.
yeah, that obviously has little effect, and that's where sort of the Yelp internal weighting comes into effect, right? Because if you can detect that kind of thing and you can kind of not weight it as much, then um, you can sort of protect the business from bad actors, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, you can have much more sophisticated attacks, like from a rival, or even from, in the case of Twitter, you have an attack from Russian election bots, right?
Mhm.
So, and even when there's no bad actors, it always features the vocal minority essentially, right? And that what that minority consists of changes depending on the day and the situation and the product, but the vocal minority will always have control over what is visible in these things.
Yeah, for the open sea, blue
Right,
sky
right.
type of comments that's just available for to anyone.
And that includes social media as well, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, like, I think you probably know this for sure, but the people that post a lot on subreddits are not at all a direct correlation with the people that play a lot of the game, right? They are
Yeah, I mean, they could be, but
right.
yeah, you can't
It's
assume. You
certainly not
certainly
a
can't assume
same.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
I mean, yeah, it's just by just the fact that they spend time posting on
right.
forums
Yeah,
will make them a little different than some of the
right,
people, a lot of the people that play your game,
right.
probably.
Yeah. So that's kind of a dichotomy that we have to deal with at some point, right? Like feedback, you really need a lot of feedback and you need to listen to it, but you also, it's hard to do that because feedback kind of sucks. Like I feel like I've not encountered a great feedback system at any
Yeah,
point, right?
and I mean, I tend to think that any feedback system that is, I mean, I hesitate to say good, but any feedback system that is better than the what we just described, you have to, there has to be some kind of selection process
Yeah.
for the people,
Right.
and there has to be some sort of crafting of the questions or the way it's laid out to get you useful stuff. Because yeah, like you said, leaving it completely in the hands of a rando, you just can get total trash, and you shouldn't listen to it.
In fact, you can't even guarantee the most extreme problem is you can't even guarantee that's real feedback, right? Because you're susceptible to bad actors or body responses
and
or whatever.
people have all kinds of reasons for, I mean, even if you do pick people for your surveys or focus groups, a lot of the time, like focus groups, they're people that will take $30 for 2 hours of answering questions about random shit.
Right.
And they may just say positive things to get through and take their money and move on. Like I've been to a few focus groups where people, they try to like triage these people by saying like, oh, do you play games? How many video games do you play a week? And do you know about this game? And blah, blah, blah. What do you think of Call of Duty or whatever?
I love Call of Duty.
And then those people will get hired for the focus group, and the focus group is like literally playing a game in a room. Mm-hmm. And it'll be clear that they have never held a controller before. They've never played a video game before. They lied to get in because they want to be paid. So there's so many elements of feedback that can poison the well a bit.
What do you think about trial by jury?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, the fact that the lawyers can pick who's on the jury means it's not good already. But I don't know. Who could say? People in juries usually don't have full information, I'd say.
Right. There's problems all around with this apparently great system.
Yeah, and people forget that lawyers lie all the time, and
wait, really?
They don't put enough.
I don't think. I don't think lawyers lie. Aren't they under oath that they can't lie, right?
Oh, that's true. If they do the under oath thing and they put their hand on the Bible, they can't lie then.
Yeah, they literally
sometimes
can't.
Outside of the courtroom.
No. They would never. No lawyer has ever lied under oath, right? That's
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think it's even possible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's funny that nobody like laughs openly when asked to do that. Do you swear to tell the whole truth in front of God? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, what if I don't believe in God? Is that a loophole?
I mean, a lot of people don't and still do that. I mean, you have to do the thing.
You have to do that because you're in America. One nation under God.
And if you don't, people are like, what the fuck? He's a liar. He's admitting he's a liar.
Yeah, God. See, the thing is, if you lie and you don't get caught, God will judge you, but only after you die, right? So for the rest
is it only then he doesn't like send you trials in your life if you're bad?
Well, no, that's actually highly antithetical to the core belief of what God does. I think. I guess I don't know if it's quite sacrilegious, but
it's just judging in the afterlife kind of thing.
But also, if you repent, your sins are forgiven. So, there's a bit of a double standard there.
You just have to it's so convenient, isn't it?
So the thing is, if you're Catholic, I recommend that you change your sect, because in Catholicism you have to like go to confession and sometimes pay money to repent, and in most Protestant sects you can just repent and you're good. So
you can
if
just
you want
be
to
like,
save,
I accept Jesus at the last minute.
Yeah. You just have to like admit, but you don't even have to admit it publicly, right? Because in confession you have to like go tell someone that you did something wrong. And Protestantism, most Protestants just like yourself. Pray, and you're just like, yeah, I fucked up, God, my bad. Well, you can't say fucked, system. Actually. I messed up, God.
I fucked up.
Yeah. So
I made a goddamn mistake, man.
If you're Catholic, I recommend that you God, it's true, you literally made a goddamn mistake. Yeah, if you're Catholic, I recommend you look into changing to save some money. It's like a life hack.
Were you raised Catholic?
No, I was very Protestant. I was evangelical, I think would be the
Oh shit.
designation. Yeah.
Oh shit.
Well,
Evangelical. Wow.
not that the normal evangelical, not the.
Not the
Well, actually,
southern.
no. That's not the southern one.
I don't know.
Well, yeah. I
Doesn't
mean,
evangelical? That's kind of that what you talked about. Like you, as long as you say you accept Jesus or whatever, that's kind of
yeah,
the
it's
only
pretty
real
open.
thing you have
It's
to
pretty
do.
open ended. I mean, evangelical is not really a sect. It's more like a catch all in the
Oh, is it?
America. Yeah.
I don't really
Um,
know anymore. I was baptized Lutheran, I think,
yeah. Lutheran
but
and Baptist actually mean something. Evangelical is like generic Protestantism in
oh,
America.
okay,
Yeah.
interesting. And the school I went to had chapel every week, once a week. It was an
Oh, that's fun.
Episcopal school. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know what that.
but
I
I
used to know what that
never.
meant too, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anymore. I think Episcopal is like, uh, well, I'm not really sure.
I think it's some kind of
I don't
disease
know.
actually. I think it's like
Yeah,
one
I
of
think
the
so. It's like
strains
a
of bird
it's
flu.
like a kidney disease.
Yeah. Um,
Anyway,
yeah, on to
uh,
the next point, which
yeah,
is
let's move on.
even though feedback really sucks, people like in general, people should listen to feedback, right? I think that's actually true. Um, because if you consider the alternative, there's a lot of people uh, all over the world that refuse to listen to anything people tell them. Usually,
Hmm.
for me, this is my parents, right? Or for most people, it's like the equivalent of the racist uncle or the racist
Hmm.
aunt
Hmm.
in your family. These are people that live by the mantra of "can't tell me nothing," and I will tell you what I believe in and why it's correct, and I will not listen to anything that anyone else has to say. Um,
Right, right.
which is not quite. I guess that's not quite. Not listening to feedback necessarily, but I do think that it's pretty clear pretty quickly that if you basically refuse to change your mind about anything, especially when it's demonstrated to you that you're wrong or that there is a problem, right? You become a very unpleasant person to deal with on basically
Yeah,
every level.
you're an unpleasant person, and you may be just stuck in a rut that either hurting yourself or hurting other people that
Right.
uh, you just get stuck in. I suppose if you never take feedback, or another way of putting it is admitting or acknowledging that you could be wrong about something,
Right.
or
I guess
that
that's a
there could
good
be another way.
yeah, I guess that's a good point. There's kind of layers to this, right? Which is we're obviously using the extreme case, but how far off of the extreme do you actually need to get, right? Because on some, for example, like a creative visionary may not need to get very far off this extreme at all, right?
Hmm.
And they may need to budge on tangible things like maybe budget or effects in the case of a movie or in a game, maybe like a system that like just isn't
Hmm.
working that well or controls that aren't working that well. But perhaps I don't know if this is true or not, but perhaps the creative vision part, the big picture stuff, they just never need to budge on at all. Like it's okay that they don't take any feedback on that.
Hmm. Hmm.
On the other hand, if we take it out of the creative realm again, if you think about if you ever had a job, have you ever had a job, some fan?
One or two, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, me too. I've had one. There's at any job, everyone that's had a job that has a lot of employees knows this. There's gonna be a couple of people that are like this at work who just refuse
Yeah.
to accept that their ideas are wrong. Hopefully, they're not your boss, but they often are.
Hmm.
Um, or they're some on some level your boss, maybe your boss's boss's boss. Um,
Right. There's
and
a stakeholder in your
yeah,
work.
and you can understand very quickly why this is an unpleasant situation, right? Why you
Yeah.
wish they would be more open-minded and take some feedback, uh, even if, for example, their track record says they might be right or they are an expert and know what they're talking about, right?
Yeah, and especially for people who get that track record, you get more and more sure of yourself,
Right,
right?
right. And I think if you think about it in those terms, it becomes obvious that like, okay, you can't, the right thing to do is not just, you know, turn off your brain to all feedback, turn off all comments, and not listen to anybody. Right? There's
Hmm.
something in between here, which you basically need to do, even if you're a genius, and way more of these people think they're the genius than actually are, right? By a pretty healthy margin, I would assume.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, it is important to take feedback from the masses too, right? Like, if like America has passed some legislation recently, right, that is unpopular in or let's say divisive at best, right? Many different types of legislation, and obviously this is theoretically a democratic country or whatever, but it is important to sort of make people, decision makers, understand that some large number of people are upset at this decision, right? That doesn't mean that it will change, but hopefully they are understanding of the fact that many people are unhappy and not just one person, right? And it's the same thing for games.
You're talking about the political example still?
Yeah, any kind of political.
So they may, in some positions they may respond because they think the hate feedback is going to translate to them getting voted out, right?
Right. Which is good, right? It's good if you like democracy,
it should be
right?
Good.
Which I am a fan of democracy, but in games it shouldn't be so different, right? If you release a new feature and 75% of your players across all levels think it's bad or it needs to be changed in some way, even if you have a strong track record and you believe that you did the right thing and you believe that things are below whatever, hopefully you are not immune to the idea that you maybe made a mistake, right? And that the empirical data suggests that maybe you made a mistake.
Yeah, and again, if game makers are motivated by number of players or profit made, that
which again is like
75% of people didn't like something, it definitely has implications on that, right?
Right. Which is tough, right? Because if you are such a creative visionary type or whatever, you will hopefully not be motivated the most by those things, right? That's what happens when, in an ideal world, that's the thing that comes up when like the suits get involved, right? And the suits just want to monetize everything in the game and take away all its natural beauty or whatever. But
it's a innate problem with the whole capitalist system, is that at the end of the day, the goal is profit, and everything else takes a back seat.
Right.
So in any creative endeavor, it's like that as well. In our current system, you may be all about just making a soaring piece of art that people will come into, enjoy, and be changed by or whatever, but no matter where you are, somebody is holding the purse strings rather.
Right.
And you need to answer to them. So those developers either are extremely frustrated or they learn to sort of work with that system, right? I think.
And I think there has to be some give and take, right? Because there's a lot, because you also hear the stories about that taking the extreme, where it's like, this is a mom and pop company and these two control everything and they just won't listen. They just keep putting out these awful games and they won't listen to anyone that tells them. And they just are convinced that their games are great and they're just misunderstood, right?
But they still stay in business?
Well, I guess maybe they don't. That is sort of, capitalism sort of is a way to sort of standardize systemic forces, right? Where it's like you will stay in business if you stay in business. Basically, there's no third party in theory, right? In a more ideal system, there's no third party that's like propping you up, and you keep making things that are bad. Like if enough people don't like what you're doing, you will eventually go out of business. Theoretically,
yes. The idea is the market. Right. The market will adjust because of the demand being low, and you will not have the money to stay in business. Yeah.
Right. Which obviously does not always play out that way.
But again, like art, what is art worth in any form?
What is a man?
What is a man? I mean, the history of what's the word? patrons, I guess,
Yep, patrons.
patrons of the arts, you know, who are
Yep.
like, I'm just going to give hundreds of thousands of dollars to this artist. I don't necessarily care if it makes a profit. I hope it will. I hope I'll be able to sell these, but I just want to like support the art, and
Right.
that's I think that's actually a good situation. It's just
Hmm.
we're not set up to do that a lot, or
Well,
there are
we
very few people that can do that.
we have Patreon, right, which does do that. And this is a
Yeah,
separate.
with the Patreon stuff,
Yep.
it's that's a little different because it's more of like just a way to attach a subscription service
Yep.
to you whatever you're doing.
Well, not exactly, right? Because usually the goal of Patreon is that you get perks, but the content at the end of the day is free, right?
Uh,
It's not a paywall, basically.
uh, it's not.
Um,
Maybe I'm
well,
using the wrong
the
Patreons.
Patreon content, the Patreon specific things are a paywall, but generally speaking, like the impetus for the thing is not a paywall. That's my understanding, at least.
Can you give me an example?
So,
I'm not
like a
sure I understand.
YouTube channels have Patreons, right?
Uh huh.
YouTube channels keep putting out the content, and they have separate Patreon exclusive content, but the main content that exists is still on YouTube and free, right?
Okay. Okay.
The Patreon exists to support the ability to create more YouTube content, which is still free, not to
Yes.
create a
Yes. Okay.
separate service to only have Patreon content. Right? They're not trying to
Right.
move
Okay.
their business onto Patreon, basically.
Yeah, because I subscribe to podcasts on Patreon that do
Mm-hmm.
pay, basically are paywalling content, so
Okay, I
it
see.
can be that, I guess.
I guess,
But
yeah,
I do see what
that's
you're
fine.
saying.
Um,
I mean, the what's his name? One Short Eye, that guy that does all the little documentaries about adventure game speedrunning. He's got a bunch of patrons that help him pay for all of the videos he's making. Like
mhm.
a lot of people just give him cash to keep doing that, and they don't tell him he's got to do this, that, and the
Right.
others. It's
So the
just
opposite
money for
of
him.
yeah, the opposite of patron is commission, right? Which is sort of another system that independent artists use. But
Mm-hmm.
that is where you are basically doing something for someone else, right? They're paying you directly to do it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's,
Yes,
this
and in
the
that case,
monetization scheme,
you are at the
right?
will of the person who gives you that money because they're
Right.
going to want it the way they want it.
Right. And there's positive and negative to both, I think. It depends on what you're willing to do. But for example, commissions can be a much more consistent source of income and also a much higher paying source of income than patrons, right? Because so for example, for Patreon, you feel like you're obligated to continue to put out general works, but you're also trying to cater to a specific group of people at the same time, right? Whereas for commission, you have a
Mm-hmm.
very clear input output, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, I think the price of games and the monetization model of games, which definitely includes that model, the Patreon model, is something I really want to talk about at some point. But
Okay. Let's make a note.
I'll give you a preview, and I think we agree on this, and I think games cost way too little, right, compared to the amount of effort they take, but mostly compared to the amount of money people are willing to pay for other things that are much less entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah. In general, it is true, but there is certainly, if they were any more expensive, you really start limiting who can even get access to these
Mm,
things. I would think, but
that's
I don't
where
know.
free to play comes in, coincidentally.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So we'll talk about that at some point.
F2P.
I
Yeah,
think
let's.
maybe we'll
We've got a whole episode on business models and shit.
yeah. So that
What's this food truck Reddit story I'm reading here?
this is just something I came across on Reddit back when I browsed Reddit, which was just there was just a very and you hear stories like this all the time, which is like, oh, this person. So I think what happened generally was like someone made a failed food truck and then like went on a rant on Reddit about how like the system had betrayed them, and I don't think there was race involved, but there was like people don't know what they want, et cetera, right? And
Okay. Yeah.
obviously, when you post that kind of thing on Reddit, you get a lot of positive comments because people feel bad for you, and they're like, "Oh yeah, down with the system, man. Just got unlucky, whatever."
Wait, what system? Food truck system?
This, the general consumerist system, right? You can, I
Uh,
mean, I don't remember the details, but you can imagine any number of things could have been said here, like,
oh, okay.
people
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
want greasy fast food and don't
Yeah,
appreciate
I see.
quality,
They're
or whatever, right?
just sort of blaming different
Yeah,
things on. Yeah.
yeah. And sort of the comment that I still remember, I think it was in a different context at this point, was like someone said, "Well, I worked with this person, and I don't think what they said is accurate because they made a lot of unsound business decisions and refused to." So like they went out of business, right? And the comment was basically, well, this person just made a bunch of extremely unsound business decisions and refused to accept that they were unsound, and like did not listen to any advice anyone with experience in the industry gave them.
Yeah.
So it was probably, I don't remember the details again, but it was probably something basic like pricing and sourcing of ingredients, right? Like
Right. Right.
the numbers just didn't add up, and they just didn't want to hear about how the numbers didn't add up, and then they went out
Yeah.
of
I just want
business,
to blame something
right?
else.
So I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
just another example, and I think this kind of thing in different contexts happens quite frequently, right?
For sure. I think it's, kind of natural to us that we do
Yeah,
that.
certainly.
Or at least natural in the way we're all raised
Yeah.
today. I don't know.
Well, well, I have some problems with that too. But
What's
hopefully,
that?
that's just
The
a
way we're
generational thing.
raised?
Yeah, the way we're raised. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
yeah, for sure. The game of life. Uh, does in the food truck example. So, oh yeah, I was just reminded that from what I know, the food truck and like just restaurant business as a whole is like very difficult
hmm
and very hard to make money and hard to succeed. But I think it's just one of those like kind of cool. It seems like a cool thing to do, and it's like
Yep.
a romantic idea to open a restaurant and make it the way you want it and feed people. But it's like extremely hard to do well in.
Yeah. Well, I actually just watched a video on restaurant profit margins the other day. It's like three to
Oh,
five
okay. Well,
percent,
you'd
so it's
know
very
better then.
low. Um, as you can imagine, it's very low. It's very low because you can't price things that high because you have a ton of competition, and
Mm-hmm.
there's no reason to price things that high, generally speaking, right? The problem is getting enough customers. If you get more customers, you will make your money basically no matter how high you price it, right? Um, unless you obviously make it free or whatever, which is not feasible. But if you make enough food at profit, sorry, if you make some small amount of profit and you get a lot of traffic, that is generally speaking, a much better model for them than the other way around. But
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that goes into the restaurant industry is that it has a very low. It doesn't require training. Well, I guess that's not true. It does require some training, but it's something that a lot of people can get into with just knowledge that they already have, right? You don't need a degree.
Uh, yeah, I guess you. I guess so. I'm not really sure. It's just something you can kind of think like, oh,
So,
I could
mhm.
figure this out, sort of thing.
Or you already know how to do it. Like a lot of people already know how to cook, right? So uh,
Yeah.
the point is that, for example, the restaurant industry is very popular among immigrants, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't need to learn the language of the new country.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to have a degree in the new country. So, for example, if you try
Mm-hmm.
to get an office job, you potentially have a very high barrier of entry, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
even a basic office job, you need to like learn the language, you need to interview, you need to buy potentially a bunch of stuff, learn new tools that maybe you're unfamiliar with.
Yep.
So I think one of the reasons there's so many restaurants, especially ethnic restaurants, right, is that uh, they have a low startup cost, so you don't need to take out a huge loan,
Mm-hmm.
and you can start a restaurant with minimal training, or with only the training that you already had from, you know, cooking on your own, etc.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that's one of the. Uh, of course, there's also like I've also watched a lot of like the more romantic restaurateur videos when I was feeling especially down about my job. But you know,
Oh, you were thinking of opening Regal's Cafe?
no, I certainly wasn't. But just the idea of like quitting your job that you don't like and
Oh
you
yeah,
know starting something that you cared about was extremely appealing and still is extremely
yeah,
appealing.
totally.
Um,
Yeah, of course it is.
funny enough.
I mean, I get that, obviously. Uh,
But yeah,
okay.
the margins are. How do we how did we start talking
Yeah,
about this?
I'm taking us on tangents. Let's go back to
Okay.
your next truth of feedback.
Yeah. Well, the last thing is that the reason you should listen to feedback is most feedback is true in a literal sense. Like, not that most feedback is relevant or good, but it is literally true. I mean, it's pretty rare, and by most I mean like a literal like 75%, right? Not
Do you
like
mean like true to the person giving it?
yeah, like if a person said obviously if a person says my item is broken, they have a picture, that's literally true, right? But also if a person was like, hey, I had a really bad experience here, I mean that's literally true. They did have a bad experience, right? As
Yeah,
in it's
unless
not
someone is just totally making shit up, right?
right, which is rare, right? Even in a world with like Twitter bots and bad actors or whatever, most feedback is true, and that means well, it's not clear what that means, but it does mean that it could mean that you can't just ignore it wholesale. Or you can't just say, "Oh, people are just making stuff up," because I don't think that's true.
Hmm.
However, the next point is that actually, everyone really needs to ignore most of the feedback they get.
Okay.
And I think this is also true. Like because most feedback, while it is true, is also useless, right? And by useless, I mean not actionable. Like it does not lead to anything tangible that can be changed or done,
Hmm.
right?
So can you give an example of that?
So if a person says, "Hey, I played your game and I didn't have a good time." Let me give you a better example. Let's say someone went to a restaurant and the restaurant served a type of food that they weren't into, and their feedback was like, "Yeah, I don't really like this kind of food." I mean,
Yeah.
that's useless feedback, right?
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
it might be useful if 75% of the people say that, but you know, you have to understand that like most feedback is an opinion, and you can't cater to everyone's opinion, right? So if
Hmm.
someone's opinions just didn't match up to what happened, then there's nothing to do with that feedback,
Hmm.
right?
Okay. Okay.
In games, there's all kinds of different things, right? Like in games, it's like, oh, well, this game costs too much. It's like, well, maybe, but the cost is not, just because people think it costs too much doesn't mean we need to lower the price, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
For
Necessarily. Yeah.
example, or like you see this a lot in free to play games with the RNG element. It's like, well, I got so unlucky and it was really not fun. It's like, well, that's
Yeah.
kind of how, like, basically a
That's
lot of
part of
feedback
it.
boils down to like, that's how it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's
We're
sorry,
okay with that. You know.
but this is the way it is working as intended, to use a
Yeah.
engineering
Exactly.
term.
Yeah.
The second thing is the thing that comes up more often, I think, which is a lot of feedback is uninformed, right? Somewhere between naive and uninformed, right? Which happens, for example, with like politicians, right? Politics is a lot of this, which is like, hey, we have this problem. You need to do this. It's like, well,
Right. And we have no idea how the
yeah, like,
systems behind the scenes
right.
work.
Like, why don't you just build a new bridge? It's like, well, like
Yeah.
there's some uh, there are some reasons why you can't. Maybe they're valid, maybe they're not. But the giver of the feedback certainly almost always does not have enough context to propose such a solution, for example, right?
Right. And we've discussed this before, and this is something that came up with my job at Riot that um, feedback feedback is about hearing how people had a bad experience, and not necessarily listening to what you should change to make that experience better, but listening to the experience they have and then you making the decision of how you are going to affect that, if that makes sense.
I think Morrow, I think I brought up Morrow's example of the doctor-patient relationship here, right?
Uh-huh.
Where the giver of the feedback is the patient, and
This
their
is Rosewater?
yeah, their job is to. I want to do a bit where every time I say Morrow, I like recite his biography. Around the NFL does this, which is another podcast. Like Morrow,
Okay.
Mark Rosewater, head designer of Magic the Gathering. He has been head designer for some number of years. Anyway, I'll work on it.
Yeah, you can do that, sure.
One day we'll have drops, and then I can do that. But anyway, the example the example he gives, or the allegory, is a doctor patient, right? So the designer is the doctor, and the player is the patient. It's the player
Oh, right. Yeah.
needs to tell the doctor, hey, this hurts and this hurts. In the context of the game, it's like, this is not fun, this is not fun, this is really fun. But the doctor doesn't listen when the patient says, I think you need to give me an injection of XYZ. It's like, no.
Yeah.
I'm the doctor here. I understand and I believe you that this hurts. I'm not going to give you
Yeah,
an injection.
my doctor, my dick hurts. You got to make it bigger. And then the doctor says, well, if it hurts, maybe I should give you this medication. I'm like, well, okay.
I see.
That's a classic example.
Is it though? All right. What were we talking about? Oh yeah. So basically, in any situation where feedback is being given, the receiver of the feedback has like orders of magnitude more expertise than the giver, right? And that universal truth kind of adds to this idea that, well, why should we ever listen to anyone that's not already an expert? Which has some truth to it, right? But I think we've already established, like, there are some cases where you really do need to listen because you might be wrong. I guess that's what it boils down to, right?
Yeah, and I think again this brings in the element of scale of feedback when you're bringing in randos or just your general player or customer.
Right.
The feedback is going to be much more meaningful and show you a clear direction if you have a lot more people weighing in, because 10 people can have a problem that 100,000 people don't have, and you could look at a Reddit page with 10 comments and get the wrong idea.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most important things to keep in mind, right? This idea of like actually, and this is not an easy problem, by the way, either, right? The idea of actually correctly aggregating feedback and getting a representative sample.
And then there's the element is totally separate, I guess, but at game companies, my experience is people have certain things they look at on the internet as like this is where the real smart feedback is, usually Reddit. But like too many, yeah, I agree. Too many leaders and developers are like, I saw this fucking comment on Reddit and it had 5 upvotes or whatever, and I think they're right. Like, we got to do this, and then the research team will say, well, 1,000 people said the other thing, so we should probably do this. But there's like some sort of emotional connection. I think especially if you used to post on Reddit or whatever the thing you like is. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. Do you read Reddit, by the way?
No.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe I'll read it in a weird search, like searching for how to do something, but no.
I also don't really browse, but so I think maybe that's where the two of us can't really understand what the draw is, right? Because both of us look at Reddit and think, that's kind of stupid, actually. Why would anyone read this? But
it is, and there's a lot of. I mean, when I read it, it looks like a lot of dumbass opinions from dumbass people
exactly.
all the time. Like,
it looks like Twitter with upvotes, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that like fixes the problem with Twitter.
But I think it's unavoidable that a bunch of people do. I mean, like, my partner browses Reddit a lot, right? And I don't think it's because they're stupid. I don't know. There's some reason. There's various different types of appeal, right? That that the two of us probably don't understand enough to talk about.
Well, I mean, any of these things can give you endless content. I mean, And it's not that everything is false on them or whatever.
Yeah,
So you can get stuff out of them and discover things you wouldn't necessarily otherwise. But I don't know. I've maybe it's my innate misanthropy, but
maybe it's just you're old,
maybe
old
it's because
man,
I'm old.
boomer.
But forum comments and things, I'm always like, I don't even want to look. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't.
I
It's
agree. Oh man,
yeah.
one of my, I mean, like there's some so MMO forums I think are the
Hmm.
worst, but they're like so bad that I think they're funny sometimes to look at, like just how stupid people are or how like off the wall people are on those.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I believe it.
anyway,
Yeah,
I
sports
think.
fans.
Oh yeah, well, sports fans are another breed. Oh man,
Yeah.
I mean I post some comments on from the Athletic sometimes that I just find hilarious. I mean they're unhinged. Let me tell you. They
Oh, I want to see. Do you post on the server?
yeah I post on the server. I'll show some or I'll try to find some of my screenshots later.
All right. All right.
Anyway, what I usually post is like two polar opposite opinions right next to each other. So there'll be an article, and the first comment will be like, "You are completely lost your mind, author name. Like
Mm-hmm.
you are overacting so much. You're like a little crybaby on Twitter." And the next comment will be
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well said. I loved it. Agreed with everything."
Okay. Wait. So you do? So you currently troll?
No, no, no. Well, I don't post those comments. I just
Oh,
read.
you're not posting
Yeah,
them. Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
just see them. Well, I try not to look at them, but sometimes I scroll too far or whatever, and they catch my eye. They're
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. I mean,
Anyway,
I always am telling myself stop reading the comments because it'll happen.
yeah, I wish they would be hidden, but sometimes they're good. Like if you have a generally neutrally positive experience, or like you watched a really cool video, like I think it's helpful to look at the comments and like sort of understand what other people took away from the experience, or how other people also had a positive experience, or maybe they point something
Yeah.
out they didn't know.
Yeah. They could point something out you didn't notice.
Uh,
It does happen.
yeah, like I don't. That's what I mean, right? Like I struggle with the idea that like the right thing to do is just to turn off comments and turn off social media and everything. Because I
Uh,
think there is value somewhere. It's hard to find, right? Maybe it's not worth it.
yeah. I mean, I'll give you my opinion on that later.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll
If
give
we
it right now.
if we
Uh,
get there. Okay, go for it.
if we get there, yeah, we're taking. I want to keep moving, so because I know we're
Okay, I'll
already
go through this
hour
last
and a
one really
half
fast.
in.
So we've been talking about feedback in terms of like immediate feedback to something you can change. Like you release the new hero or a champion in league, right? And then you see the feedback on that, and they're like, "Oh, we could change
Hmm.
X, Y, Z, or we can wait it out." One of the main things that comes with feedback is with long-term decisions, right? So in sports, this happens a lot when a player gets cut or traded or signed or drafted, right?
Hmm.
uh, that's where the decision maker, like drafting, I think is the big one, right? If you're familiar with that process, where it's like, oh,
Yes.
we drafted X player, and then all the people with opinions about them come out, and there's nothing you can do anymore, right? But so the opinions are completely unactionable, but no one will even know if they're right or wrong for like 3 years, right?
Yeah. Is any sports team actually looking at regular like comments and shit like that? Like, do they
So
even
what's
look
kind
at
of
that stuff?
funny is that when people do interviews with like execs and whatever, like a lot of them read articles, read comments, watch talk shows, and allegedly they're immune to it. But no, a lot of execs, even at the very very top, all the way down, just read social media like the rest of us a lot of the time.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising, but that's consistent with everything I've seen as
Hmm.
well. Like
Hmm.
I'm always I'm always expecting to come and meet like a CEO who's like, nah, 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 I don't read fucking YouTube and Reddit comments because that
Right.
shit is useless. It just makes me think wrong or think it in weird ways. But no, they really care. They want to see the comment that says that was fucking awesome. And to see that comment, they
Yeah.
also have to see that fucking sucked.
Yeah.
And I think it's bad for you.
I think so too. I think so too. When we talk about, definitely won't be this episode, but when we talk about at some point like building up a system to maybe, do the best we can at feedback. I think that's the number one thing that has to go, right? You can't have that much exposure to individual OpenSea's feedback.
Yeah, and if you have a process, if you do devise a process that's at least a little better, don't supplement it with comments otherwise. Like you have to really do, you have to do it the right way, or not at all. Like,
although I agree, but I think individual behavior and decision-making process can be separate. Like I don't think we need to police. Well, first of all, it's not possible, probably, right, to like tell your employees don't read social media. But at best, you can explain the process to people and why it exists, and make it a core part of make that the focal point of the decision-making process. Hopefully people will understand. But
I can't tell you how many. This is a huge part of marketing teams' jobs, especially the people that are labeled as PR or community managers.
Oh, I love PR.
PR is like dealing with what the media says, but community managers are what's saying like what the forums say or whatever. And I've had so many conversations where just not even a designer, just somebody works on some element of the game or some feature, says, "Oh, I saw this comment and it had two people agreeing with it that said, oh, this part sucks and it makes me feel like shit or whatever. Like, we should really do something about this." And then I will have the 10-minute conversation each time where it's like, well, there's a lot of that, in many places around, and it's very hard to parse that into a meaningful, like all the stuff we're talking about, and getting down to, here's the way we think we can get better feedback. So let's do that. Support that process, and do your best to sort of write this off as all, for all the reasons that you should. But it's super common. Like a lot, it happened. I'd get emails. I'd have people coming up to me all the time, just being like, "Oh, we got this. Somebody really doesn't like this one thing," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, that's one person on Reddit." Right? You know how many people are using this?
Yeah, totally.
It's hard for us to think in those terms, evidently. I don't know.
I think, I think that's part of that is sort of the attachment to try to put people into what we read, right? It's like, maybe, for example, if one of your friends, right, really hates this, that means more to you than a random person. But if you don't know the random person, maybe you sort of you're not prepared to like assign it the proper weight, right? Because you hear it and it like tugs at you emotionally, you kind of subconsciously assign it more weight than it should, which is social media training. Maybe that's kind of the way. I do think this is something. So the reason because we've talked about this before multiple times too. I do think one of the reasons I feel like this is so important is that I think this can actually be fixed with sort of more preparation and more top-down training, for lack of a better word, right? Like having people like understand why they might feel a certain way and how to sort of parse the feedback properly and so on. Obviously it can't be perfect, but
Riot Games did do that. Like they had like seminars on that shit, which I really appreciated because it helped me have fewer conversations. But because it's like, it's not an easy thing to do. And, the thing you're working on is like, you're dedicating most of your time to it. It's your baby.
Right.
You give a shit about it. And if somebody says it sucks, it hurts you. I mean, it just does.
Which is the next point. The next point is hateful comments to damage. But actually I want to say one thing real quick, which is in tech, we often have the exact opposite experience, which is customers will have extreme, clearly problematic like bugs, for example. Like, hey, we'll get a customer ticket. Hey, this customer has lost like 20. We would take that very seriously, actually. But like this customer's UI is taking like 10 times longer to load than everyone else's UI. Should we look into this? and then it gets passed around to like up the customer support chain. Then it gets passed to engineering, and engineering is like, okay, I'll look at it. And then we spend like 10 minutes looking at it. It's like, I looked into it and I can't find anything too strange about this customer. I'm going to assign it to this other team to take a look. And then that it just sits there for like 3 weeks, and the customer support
gets
agent,
shuffled around.
yeah, because so it's kind of funny that we almost have the opposite issue where there's so many problems that unless it starts affecting a lot of people or we can get sued, sorry, we actually don't care. Maybe that's part of
I get that.
Yeah, maybe that's part of the benefit of not caring about what you're working on. When what you're working on is not your baby, then
it's easier to be neutral about that stuff.
Yeah, or objective from a capitalist
objective
sense,
is
right?
the word. Yes,
maybe not correctly objective, but capitalistically objective. So
right, why does this matter to me? Yeah.
But yeah, so I do want to move on, which is hateful comments do damage, which we talk about. Like, no matter who you are, well, I guess maybe not no matter who you are, but for the vast majority of people, if you read something that's extremely negative towards you, the extreme example being a death threat, you take some damage, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
The effect is different for people, and how much they can take is different. So, in other words, people have different amounts of defense and HP, right? Some people have really high defense and can brush that stuff off. But I think for most people, they don't have as much defense as they think they do, and it can wear on them over time, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was hurt by whenever there was a negative comment about all that velocity gnome stuff at the time.
Oh,
wow. Especially if people were like, this is fucking fake. I was like,
yeah,
it's not fake.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the part where obviously I take damage from that stuff too. Like, even if it doesn't affect me, like I see someone just have a completely unreasonable opinion, and it's like you think it's funny, but then you're just like, man, that really sucks that people think that way. Like, can't. For me, it's more like depressing. Like, for example, at the beginning of COVID, there was this video someone posted in the server about like walking around Orange County trying to give masks out to people, which was like obviously a joke, but man, like I laughed at it, and then like 10 minutes later I was just depressed. I was like, man, like what is wrong with people? Like, this is the world I live in. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it'll happen with stuff I read with politics for sure. I mean, people have absolutely insane points of view.
Yep.
Sometimes, yeah.
No, I think it's all the time.
Okay, all the time.
But I think, and I don't have the answer to how to. Maybe the answer is I don't think there is an answer, to be honest, about how we can like insulate ourselves from that. But I think we could try to make it better, right? But we also have to accept that like we're gonna get negative comments at some point, and it's gonna.
Yes, there's no getting around that. Like we are gonna get negative comments. I think there are ways you can insulate yourself, especially if you're part of an organization and there are other people working with you. You can have honestly, you can have your community department be the only ones who read the comments. Right. I mean, is that realistic? Probably not, because people do it anyway, but that there is a way to insulate yourself if you are consistent with it. You could be like, all right, my executive assistant is going to read all of these letters before they come to my desk, and they're going to filter out shit that is like, fuck you, I'm going to kill you.
Right.
And then I never have to see that stuff. Like, there are things you can do like that. I don't know how often any creative person does that, though.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'm sure politicians do that, right? I'm actually quite sure.
That's true. You're right. They have people that take care of all that shit to insulate them from that. Yeah, exactly. Because
like politics, But to be a politician, I think you have to already be so cynical that like you fundamentally don't care, right? You're just like, just tell me the numbers.
To be a politician?
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think some people are in it for the right reasons, but not a lot.
You would hope so. Yeah. But yeah, so So I think it's important to remember that even from our side too. Like sometimes we say things that does damage. In fact, I bet we've done it already on this podcast. Like I bet we've already
Oh,
said
sure.
a ton of things that someone, for example, working at Nintendo would hear and be like, "Man, these people don't know what they're talking about, and they're just shitting on me for no reason. Like, what
Yeah,
did I do?"
probably. Yeah.
You know. So I don't think the answer. So basically, I don't think the answer is ever going to be just don't post your opinion. I think that's what a lot of people say. It's just like, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. Just don't say anything. I just don't think
Hmm.
that's, well, I guess we have a podcast now, so we're obviously biased, but I just don't think that's realistic. And I don't think that's the answer either. Right.
Yeah, you're not. There's no way to get people to really do that.
Yeah. And I don't think I don't think the world would be a better place if we did that. Obviously, I
Okay.
think we shouldn't post death threats or whatever, like ever. Right.
Hmm.
But saying that you don't like something, like watching, 'cause basically, I think what I'm saying, the short form of what I'm saying is there's a common idea floated around that if you have nothing good to say, just don't say anything at all. And I don't think that's good. First of all, that's not, obviously not possible, but I don't think that's good either. I don't think that's
No,
a
I
better
mean that's a way to be
world,
polite, but
right?
yeah, not.
I don't think that's a better world than one where people tell you that they had a negative experience when they have a negative experience. Like I don't think that's a problem necessarily.
Well, I think it's a weird state of affairs that we assume comments are always should be there for everything.
That's
Like
true.
I
Hmm.
just we kind of with the internet we're like, all right, we're gonna put comments on everything
Right.
because if everyone in the world can comment and weigh in, we'll get to the correct answer and we'll have the best. Everything will be, uh, the masses will decide if
Right.
something is good or not, and there won't be, it'll all the good things will rise to the top and the bad things will go to the bottom. But it didn't happen like that, and we are still treating comments as if they need to be there by default.
Right.
And is that true for offline things? I mean, I guess there are
No.
comment cards or whatever, but it's not like you can
No,
go
no.
into a fucking grocery store and yell out, these aisles are in the wrong fucking place or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't know,
Yeah.
and be taken seriously.
Now here's the thing though. Real in the real world, in offline world, I suppose, because the internet is
Hmm.
part of reality.
The mundane worlds,
Unfortunately,
yeah.
um, like grocery stores try really hard to try to have you give them any feedback that you will give them. Right.
Oh,
For
you're saying
example,
they're desperate for
yeah, they're
feedback.
trying very hard to get any feedback. Right. Like, hey, do you actually think that this aisle is in the wrong place? Like, we can fix that. Just tell us what you
Right,
think,
right.
please.
Hmm.
Obviously,
Hmm.
that's a bit of an exaggeration, but that's why you get so many calls, right? That's why it's like, hey, every time a repair person comes to your house, you get an email. It's like, hey, tell us what you thought of the experience, etc.
Yep, yep.
And I guess that is probably why comments exist, right? Because they want to know what the problems are and how they can be better, and
I
so
mean,
on. But
yes, I'm also a little cynical about that stuff. I think
right,
part of it is simply a way to evaluate that particular
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
worker.
yeah,
It's just another way to
right,
keep tabs on them.
right.
Um, but I guess the grocery store example makes sense what you're saying. But I don't know, like does a restaurant really want feedback from everybody?
Um, well, I guess it depends a lot on the situation, right? Uh,
Yeah, I guess it
it's all
does.
contextually dependent, which is why I for sure agree with you. Like, I don't think comments should be on everything. Well, I think a lot of situations don't need to have comments.
But at
But
the same time, it's not like ignoring all comments is the answer here.
right. So I saw something very recently that kind of changed my mind about this, which is like Twitch chat. Well, in this case, it was YouTube chat, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I just saw a comment scroll by in chat that was like, uh, I guess we're responding to someone who said the very predictable thing, like, "Chat, you guys are all enter low rating here, right? You're all silver scrubs. Can you not talk about the strategy of the game? These people are way better than you." And the response was very simply, the point of chat is like everyone in chat statistically is not going to be very good, and they're like chat wouldn't
Yeah,
exist
we
if it's only strong players. So if you don't want us to have a good time watching the game and shit on players for no reason and talk about whatever you want to talk about, then you
Yeah,
should just close
that's
chat.
part of the fun for them.
That is
yeah.
that's the point, right? And I think that's
And I mean, it's just
often
like
lost.
P-sports as well. I mean, people
Yeah,
do that.
exactly.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think that's wrong. Like, I don't think just because you're not an expert means you don't get to say anything, right? In fact, if that happened, P Sports would make a lot less money, right? Like,
yeah. Okay.
and betting, obviously, which is now a huge industry, would make a lot less money
Oh
too.
my gosh,
like,
yes,
you
it
know?
is.
So basically,
Hey,
I
is
guess
there like underground esports betting that I don't know?
well,
about?
there's overground
must
esports
be.
betting. Every esports
Oh, there
team
is?
these days is sponsored by a betting company. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah,
Wow.
betting
What a
betting
world.
is like well, it's true for P sports too, but yeah, betting is like the big esports revenue. It's betting in Saudi Arabia, so you know, esports.
Huh. Oh, wow. Okay. I should look into this. I'd like to know more about
We
that.
we should talk about it. We should talk about the business of esports because this is another thing that's come up recently. That's kind of made me rethink some things.
I wonder if I could invite an esports person I know.
I would love.
I need
would
to
love
talk to these
talk
people.
about the business of esports because
I need to actually talk to these people.
to give you some context, like Beyond the Summit was a large studio, independent esports studio that never took VC capital that shut down recently. And sort of part of the postmortem that I heard was like, esports is just a big scam, actually. Like, no one has successfully monetized turning viewers into money, which is interesting.
Okay. You mean it's a scam in that we actually don't have a business here?
Yeah, exactly. Not
Okay.
that literally it's a scam, but like when you talk to sponsors, it's all a scam because the numbers don't turn into
Don't add up.
money, right? Like no one has
Ah.
found a way to add, which is why the independent ones maybe struggle, but the ones that survive get money from Saudi Arabia. Like ESL was recently bought by.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah.
So, I
House
would
of
love to
Saud,
talk
baby.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, at Riot there was a sort of understanding.
Oh,
Believe,
actually,
at least
wait.
from my perspective. Uh-huh.
I want to say one thing, which is they get money from Saudi Arabia or they get money from the marketing department of the publisher, right? That's the other part where if you're Riot, you can just consider esports a marketing expense. But if you're an independent studio that's like contracted to Riot, then that's where you get into the esports is the scam part. Anyway.
Okay. Yes, I see. And that is where I was going with that is that Riot sees it less as a moneymaker, esports by itself, and more of a, this thing that has a halo effect on everything.
Right.
It's an interesting entertainment side thing that people love, but you're not making money off of it exactly. You're just making money off of people staying in your system.
Right. So that's where
staying interested in the game.
Yeah. That's where it makes sense for Riot, right? But for the independents, the middle companies, in other words, right? They're basically completely at the whim of either the publisher or investors or temporary sponsors, right? And as soon as one of those dries up, they die because they don't actually have income. That's what the postmortem kind of indicated to me. So I would be
Interesting. Okay.
very interested in talking about that in detail at some point.
Yeah, me too. Okay.
What were we talking about?
Hateful
Sometimes
do damage.
Sometimes hateful comments do damage, and sometimes anyone that talks into a mic or writes on the internet, which is everyone, has also done damage to other people. And I don't think I don't think just because we've done damage to someone that we need to stop, right? Like I think it's okay that people write negative comments. Like I don't think that's something that needs to stop. Which is hard.
And I mean, like, what are we gonna do? Like,
well, yeah, that's part of it. But like, even as we can't control the system. We control ourselves as individuals, right? And if everyone, but I don't think we, as individuals, should stop from giving our opinion when, even if it's not perfect or even if it's somewhat uninformed, if we think something is wrong, I don't think we need to be careful at saying that we think it's wrong. We should. There's caveats to that. That doesn't mean there. Basically, I'm saying we should exist somewhere in between. Say whatever you want on one end, and don't say anything negative on the other end. Right? I think we need to. exists somewhere in there.
Yeah, and like why are you and I doing this in the first
Right.
place? I mean,
Just to
at least for
summary.
now, it seems more like it's fun. It's fun to talk about
Yeah.
this stuff
Right.
with each other,
Right.
and we may say things that are totally uninformed on the way.
Right.
And I guess I'm okay with that sometimes. Like if people correct us, that's fine, and I think
Yeah.
and they're right. I'll be like, oh yeah, we got that wrong or whatever. But yeah, it's not like I'm doing this to be 100% accurate and really teach someone something. I guess if that makes sense.
And I think the important thing to remember is that that's not possible, right? Like
Okay.
even the greatest experts don't know everything. Even they don't even know everything about the thing they're an expert on, right? They're wrong,
Mm-hmm.
just like the rest of us are wrong. And yeah, I guess the other thing is like if you say like, hey, you need to be X rank to post in this chat. Well, the person above that rank is always going to think, hey, well, they're gold, but they don't know what they're talking about, or they're plat, but they don't know what they're talking about,
Yeah,
or they're
they got
diamond, but they
lucky.
don't know what they're talking about, right? Even if they don't got
Yeah.
lucky, it's like, well, the game is so different in diamond compared to at the top level. You don't know what you're talking about, and that's already like the top 0. Whatever percent of people, right? So
Right. Right.
it's just not realistic for any number of reasons. Okay, I think we talked enough about social media, to be honest. I guess the one thing
Okay.
I do want to talk about is, well, first of all, social media users is not a representative sample of users, right? I think we've established that. That's very true.
Wait. What? Social media
Social media
users?
users and users are not, like, social media users is not a representative sample of all users, right? Like, you take the people on social media that post a lot on social media, they are not going to be an accurate representation of sort of a random sample of your users.
So you're saying there there's a minority of posters and a majority of lurkers? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I mean is like uh, they like some of them may not be users at all, for example. But what I mean is like uh, the opinions. I guess what's the best way of putting this? I thought this was perfect actually, so I didn't think about it at all.
Yeah, I'm confused.
So
I'm
it's
not
good.
sure
It's
what
good
you're
that you
trying to
called me out on
say.
this. Basically, your users fall into. I guess we can use playtime as an example, right?
Can you give me give an example of
Yeah. So I'll
like
give you an example. So
users of
play.
what?
So let's say you have your League of Legends. You
Uh
can
huh.
filter out your user. You can like stratify your users by playtime, right? So there's
Yep.
like X% play this much and X% play that much, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
If you do the same thing for just the people that post on social media, the stratification will not look like your user stratification. That makes sense, right? So
It won't
they
match up in the same way.
right, and
Okay.
that's
Okay.
true of basically the people that post on social media are not a random sample of your users.
Oh.
It's a
Okay. Yes.
it's like a
Totally.
specific subset, and that which subset exactly is it varies,
And it's
depending
hard to
on
know.
right. It's well, you I guess you can't know, right? But
Yeah.
um, it varies, and like the ranks whatever vary, and people lie and so on and so forth. But social media basically is some sort of minority, right,
Mm-hmm.
cluster somewhere in your user base.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that you have to be, I think, is important to keep in mind about the feedback that they give is they're driven by uh, engagement, right, or clout, which
Mm-hmm.
often leads. I find this kind of funny, which people write these like stories about like they go in depth about their experience, right? They like write a little narrative about what happened to them, and
Yeah, with twists and turns.
if you actually if you like read it sort of, you try to read it objectively, like first of all, most of the information is completely irrelevant, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, a lot of things are clearly exaggerated for narrative effect, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
For sure.
because they're it's not really, they're not trying to give you feedback, they're trying to like get sympathy, right, or whatever, or like make people angry with them. um, so uh so
Yeah. Sometimes you just want somebody to click the this review is funny button.
I don't think I ever
A lot
clicked
of,
that button, but yeah, that is
I
a
do.
cool.
I like putting funny on like very serious negative
Oh,
reviews.
I see. Negative reviews are. I mean, some negative reviews are just out of this world. Like I can't wrap my mind around humanity sometimes. Maybe all
I
the
mean,
time,
I
but
get it. Like,
yeah.
we're all trying to have some control over our lives, and
Oh yeah.
to varying degrees we have it.
I
But
mean,
most people have a lot of shit that they don't control, and this is a way to pretend you got something that that you can control. I think.
sometimes
It's,
when you really want to have a lot of control over your life, you invade Ukraine for fun. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
If you got that kind of power, exactly. Because he was
uh,
lonely.
well, I don't know if that was the reason, but yeah,
No,
sure.
I'm joking.
He had a. Ooh, okay. Anyway, before we get banned by the Russian state media, if we haven't already,
hmm That's a big market for us.
uh, actually, I want to know what you think about this. Like, do you think feedback on social media can be like uniquely valuable in some way, or do you think we should just ignore all of it
Uh, Uniquely valuable. So, like, as
compared
opposed
to
to a totally
other?
separate system you set up
Yeah,
to get feedback.
yeah, like a forum,
Uh,
for example.
it's God. It's just so hard to say because it could be the answer could be yes, but we just don't know.
I
Like,
guess. Do you
for
think
you,
it's
you,
worth?
you could have people that are. I guess I'm imagining people that I don't know live in another country but really have good insights and are posting on your
Mm,
forums, but for whatever reason would never or could never get into your official alpha system or whatever for
yeah.
feedback. Like I can imagine that happening, but in general, I guess I'm gonna say no. Like
Mm,
I don't think there's anything special about social media users versus any other way you get feedback.
that's true. Now that you mentioned that, I do think there's one potential significant point of value, which is like you get people that are not inherently, you get opinions from people that are not that are not like already inherently interested in your product, maybe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so for example, you set up a system where it's like you have to go on our games website to uh, to post the feedback, or even more extreme, you have to, like you said, like sign up for our you know privileged tester alpha program. Well,
Yeah,
for
the
us, it would be
idea
the
the
beta
idea
program,
being like you're only going to put in that effort. One, you're only going to put in that effort if you think you have something to say
right?
or think this is something you want to be a part of,
Right.
and it's and yeah, and the on the other side, it just weeds out people who are just I just want to yell at you.
Yeah. So Reddit obviously is exempt because that mostly lives on subreddits, but like Twitter, for example, you could potentially get feedback from random 400 follower DJ that just happened to try your game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I think there maybe is some value in that, but obviously we can't stop it, so we have to deal with it, right? It's not like we can
I
just
mean, yeah, there's low barrier to entry
right,
feedback you get on
right.
social media, but often we associate low barrier to entry feedback with it being worse, but maybe that's not always the case. It definitely doesn't have to be.
Worth investigating, I think. I mean, I think this can be something that you could do in a pretty simple study, right? For example, just like find a
Yeah,
hashtag and search for it and
I
see what you get.
and I'm sure there's a lot of research on this very subject.
Yeah,
So
probably. Yeah,
I wonder
probably.
what I can find.
Okay. Well, we're close to 2 hour mark. Do you want to talk about how many of these
Yeah.
next
So,
topics do you want to get into here?
well, I do want to talk about hate, and
Okay.
you see, I wrote a bunch of stuff about
Yep.
how to
Yep.
respond to death threats.
Yep.
Huh. Fuck, we're only like halfway through this outline.
Well, we
Should
don't we
we?
definitely don't have to do the end. I think we can leave some of this stuff, but
Uh, yeah, I guess my question is: should we spend another hour going through some of this, or should we call it for now and record again and get all the rest of it?
yeah, I think let's do the latter. I think
Okay.
well, let's just do a couple
I
of
think I
things
do
that we
want to
can.
talk more about this stuff, but
Yeah,
I know since we're at 2 hours, I'm already slowing down.
yeah, makes sense.
My
Um,
brilliant comments are becoming, little more boring and stupid.
Oh, yeah, this guy's running out of gas. You need
Mhm.
some Red Bull to get you some wings. Do you drink caffeine, actually? Do you consume caffeine?
I do drink coffee in the morning, but otherwise, no.
I see.
Do you?
Only on some days.
Um,
I used to do a lot in college, in high school.
Uh-huh.
I've actually had a much better life in general after I like stopped drinking nearly as much, but maybe like 2 or 3 days of the week, especially when I go to work, I'll have some caffeine.
Like coffee or red or energy
Tea,
shit, energy
coffee,
drinks. Oh, tea.
no more energy drinks. Energy drinks are too much for me these days.
I used to drink like 5 or 6 Pepsis a day
Wow.
growing up and into my early 20s. And I used to get sick all the time. And then when I stopped drinking soda totally, I rarely get sick anymore. So,
Interesting.
I
don't
mean,
know
it's
if-
one of the worst things you can do for yourself is drinking soda.
Well, I drink soda
It's-
every day, so that's.
Oh, wait, what? I thought you said you don't have caffeine. Is it caffeine free?
I don't count soda as caffeine because the amount of caffeine
What?
is so low compared to.
Oh, come on. Well, that is.
What? It
no.
doesn't count. What? I'm serious though. It's like
Doesn't count.
a Coke is like 1/5 of the caffeine of like a cup of tea, which is like
Okay.
1/2 of a cup of coffee. So
And how many are you having?
one.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Um,
I was having 6.
I see. That's true. So.
All right, well let's call it for now. When we come back, we'll be back with more feedback discussion.
So thank you for listening to episode 9 of Open Betas with Regal and Swimfan. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
That's what you hearing. Listen, X gon' give it to you. Fuck, wait for you to get it on your own. X gon' deliver to you. Knock, knock, open up the door, it's real. With the non-stop pop, stainless steel. Go hard, getting busy with it. But I got such a good heart that I make the motherfucker wonder if you get it.